Light was able to make chemicals in us that weren't there before. When I saw this, I immediately realized that everything in medicine was completely ass backwards. And nobody has told you why. I'm telling you why right now. Because you're blue light toxic. Blue light makes you fat. What I tell you my day job was, I'm a neurochirurgien, right? The alpha wave in the human brain is 7.83 hertz, exactly the same. You have this direct loop that goes to the pineal gland, but the energy comes in here. This energy has to be balanced, blue and red. What does this first do? It turns your pituitary gland on. That's why I stopped operating at 7 a.m. You need to question everything. You're looking at a guy speaking to you right now who doesn't believe pretty much anything he learned in medical school can be taken with any truth. The answers are right in front of us, folks. Even though the answers are right in front of us, if your dopamine level is low, you will not perceive the truth right in front of your face. Energy and mass are exactly the same thing. The only thing that's different is the environment that each side of the equation is in. Now, the pupil is a perfect black box radiator. What does that mean? Because we're doing a little physics here. It means that light can go in and come back. How did I know immediately that UV light got through? I challenge anybody to go to batteries and bulbs, buy a UVA flashlight, LED, put it in anybody's red. You know what you'll see? You'll see fluorescence come right back. You don't need anything else. So every time the ophthalmologist, like when I gave this talk 3 months ago and I proved to them, they were full of That's how I did it. I brought a UVA flashlight and shined in all their eyes. I said, what'd you see? Explain, based on what we learned in medical school. That shut them up pretty quick, okay? Because you don't need a lot of photons to see the effect. This is something that everybody in this room can do, reproducible. So when you go to the ophthalmologist, you can say, I don't believe what you're telling. But here's the key. You guys have heard from all your food gurus that you've heard previously talk in all these other years about tryptophan, about tyrosine, about phenylalanine, and histidine. But you know what you don't know about aromatic amino acids? They all absorb UV light. Did you know that? Well, I didn't 12 years ago. But the key thing is the eye is loaded with these amino acids specifically. So that raised a question. Why is this? Well, I found out from physics that a benzene ring, which is in every single aromatic amino acid, is a photon trap. And they absorb all frequencies of UV light. So guess what that means? That 250 to 380 is absorbed by this. That's the reason why we don't see it, because it's designed to do something different. So there's something that started. Pollack's book came out in 2014. There's two researchers named Gelduce and Perparta. In 2000, they found that the EZ forms something called the coherent domain. 13% of the exclusion zone in water, when sunlight hits water, makes something called the coherent domain, which makes 1 million electrons, free electrons, delocalized to run all the biochemical programs. Does anybody know how many biochemical programs run per second in a cell? It's 100,000. Guess what has the control of those enzymatic flux? If you ask any PhD or any nutritionist at all, the answer is they don't know the answer. But guess what? It turns out light frequencies can control all of them by a molecular resonance phenomenon. And that is how biochemistry works. Now, this one is for the McKissick lecture. Everything that she told you is in this slide. So if you want to learn how light works, here you go. This is a protein. UV light hits it. That is a light antenna. It's surrounded by water. Light is an electromagnetic wave that changes to an electromechanical wave. That's called sound. That sound is collected in water. Now, here's the interesting thing. Water is a magnetic dipole. What does that mean? Hydrogen and oxygens, positive and negative. That's the reason why it's tied to magnetism. The first time that we found out that magnetism truly controls sound, Ohio State University Acoustic Phonons 2014. You can look it up. When the light hits here, it's absorbed in the water. That changes the hydrogen bonding networks. What is the physical change? The physical change is the density of the water. That is how this works. Fundamentally, quantum mechanically. Now, here's the interesting thing. Mitochondria makes the cytosolic water that surrounds all the things in the cytosol, including the nucleus and the mitochondria. Where is this connection? Well, for those of you who don't know, the Schumann resonance comes from the interaction of sunlight on the ionosphere of the Earth. That's why people call it the heartbeat of Earth. But it's an electrical tension that develops between the solar plasma and the atmosphere that generates the 7.83 hertz. Why do you need to know about it? What I tell you my day job was, I'm a neurosurgeon, right? The alpha wave in the human brain is 7.83 hertz, exactly the same. So guess what? The solar system entrains you to these solar systems as it comes to Earth. That's how it works, okay? Why is it important? It generates the alpha wave. So when you live in an environment today, you don't have as many alpha waves. Why? Because non-native EMF, what's the number one effect, which you'll learn about later, dehydrates your cells because it lowers your redox potential in your mitochondria. In other words, original slide, you can't make as much water from your own mitochondria. That's where the dehydration comes. And for the ladies in the room or the guys in the room who are not big science people, simple biohack at home, take a piece of steak that you have left over, throw it in the microwave, taste it. What does it taste like? Shoe leather. Why? What do microwaves do? They vibrate and rotate water really fast. It heats up and it dehydrates the meat. It's happening to you right now here in Vermont. It's happening to all of us because of these shitty lights that we have. Getting back to the topic, the eye, the SCN is the big focus. In medicine, the big focus is on the camera. That's why all these old people go see the ophthalmologist, and what do they get? Cataract surgery, right? Anybody know what they put in for cataract surgery after it's done? An implantable lens. And guess what that lens blocks? UVA, UVB, 100%, and also these days, 50% of blue light, in case you didn't know that. That's been a change since 2009. What people don't realize, 42% of sunlight that falls to Earth is infrared A light. It's balanced all the time by blue, okay? Especially when the sun rises. Now, this is a side picture of an eyeball. What you need to know, and this goes back to physics, in case you don't, blue light bends the most by gravitational lensing. It turns out this is important in the eye because when blue light comes through, it falls in front of the retina. That's the reason why when you use a computer screen or you use these horrible lights up here, you get visual obscuration. In other words, your vision gets worse. What does that cause? It causes you elongation of your eyeball. When your eyeball gets longer, you get myopia. What happens when you get myopia? The next step is you get retinal detachments. What's the end result? Acute macular degeneration. Anybody know anybody who's got that? Yeah, lots of people. And guess what else? Guess what causes cataracts? Blue light toxicity. Why? The brain is trying to protect itself from this light that's coming in, so it makes the lens hazy, so this doesn't happen. But why is it important to a mitochondriac? Well, it turns out in about 2003, 2004, through 2009, we had some really cool researchers that found out there's another opsin in the eye. And that opsin works with the retinal ganglion cells, and that's called melanopsin. Melanopsin is the hormone that runs the central retinal pathways in the eye. And it turns out they're really important at nighttime, and they link to melatonin, but not in the way most people think. The fovea is where the rest of the visual light spectrum fall, and it falls right here. Why? That's acute vision. That's your camera focus. That's what the ophthalmologists all pay attention to. They don't pay attention to this. The only ophthalmologists that do, you're going to hear about later, are the Japanese guys, who are the guys that I talked to 3 months ago. They've been on this way quicker than our American counterparts. But here's the key. I'm going to make a very controversial statement now for many people in this room. Central retinal pathway energizes everything distal to it. So let me explain that to you. It basically turns on your pituitary gland, and it turns on everything distal in the human brain. And I'm going to show you how. This paper, I should say this gentleman, his name is Fritz Hallwich. He was an amazing cat. He was an ophthalmologist in Germany. He was born in the 1920s. He happened to live in a time where we didn't have intraocular lenses. And one of the things that he noticed is that when he saw people with cataracts, he would cut the cataract out so they could see. And for those of you who don't know, this is what happened to Vincent van Gogh. You know, when he painted haystacks, the reason why he painted them in all different colors is because when you take a cataract out and you don't put a lens in, you can see UV. In case you didn't know that. So that's the reason why haystacks has all the different shades, because he was able to see it in so many different colors as the light changed. Well, it turns out this doctor actually practiced medicine in a time that we could never recapitulate now. That's why sometimes looking back is a good thing. And I started to look really far back. In fact, as a neurosurgeon, these guys, especially Cajal in 1891, he's the father of modern neuroanatomy. I started to find papers about this energetic pathway that has huge effects on growth and metabolism through the eye. You didn't hear me say gut. You didn't hear me say food, did you? Turns out that Hallwich did something rather remarkable. And he wrote about it in this book here from 1979. And I guarantee nobody in this room's ever read it. If you think Weston A. Price's book is huge, you should read this sucker, because it's unbelievable what he did. He basically took cataracts out of people and then noticed and watched them and saw that their growth and metabolism improved tremendously. They started to lose weight, they started to feel better, they started to sleep better. And he documented it all. And guess what? He didn't just do it in humans, he did it in all kinds of animals. And he documented the color changes that occurred on animals after he took their cataracts out. How their coats changed, their surfaces, how they started to act on the farm. Okay? That's how important this was. And he went even further. He checked their urine. And you know what he found? He found there was metabolites of hormones that occurred after he took the cataract out that weren't there before. So in other words, light was able to make chemicals in us that weren't there before. Doesn't that sound a lot like E equals MC squared? Like, how did light get turned into things with structure? How does this really happen? Do you really think that you need it all from diet and exercise? There's another way. Most of the ophthalmologists I talked to 3 months ago didn't know a damn thing about Fritz Hallwich. And he was an ophthalmologist and well published. And the crazy thing is there was another guy that you're going to learn about a little bit later named John Ott. And you know what he was famous for? He was Walt Disney's animator that did time-lapse photography. Turns out he made some key investigative slides for Disney and dropped it, but then he took it to the medical boards and different physicians who let it go by the wayside. And what he found is that when he took plants and he put them in different light, the chloroplast molecules rotated faster than not. Then he decided to do it on animals, and he found out that one of the cells in the eye called the retinal pigmentum epithelium, which you're going to hear about shortly, at the base of the eye, has melanin granules that absorb what? UV light, because it's made out of those things that we talked about, rotates faster, and guess what it makes? What Ruben talked about, a DC electric current in the eye. So that means you can regenerate tissues when you have a high DC electric current. Isn't that right, Ruben? Didn't Becker tell us that? Isn't that interesting? He went even further, and this is probably one of the most counterintuitive things I'm going to tell you. This is a picture of people's pituitary glands who were blind and who could see. What did he do? He went the extra distance. This is what I want you to focus in on. Light slows, energy is lost, the pituitary gets bigger. When I saw this, I immediately realized that everything in medicine was completely ass backwards. Why? Why did I say that to you? Everybody in this room, except the people that heard me talk last year, believe that people get fatter because they eat too much. Turns out it's exactly the opposite. So when you sprain your ankle, does your ankle get bigger or smaller? Okay, when you have heart failure, does your heart get bigger or smaller? Okay, just so you know, he said it gets bigger. Here's the third one. When the star in the sky dies, does it get bigger or smaller? It gets a red giant. So everything that loses energy in the universe gets bigger. What did Hallwich tell us? Hallwich showed that when light slows, the pituitary gets bigger. You know why it's getting bigger? Because light is getting turned into chemicals that you call hormones that go in to the nuclear DNA to change it. Guess what that means? That means light is capable of altering DNA, it also means that light is capable of potentially reversing my previous problem. Meaning that when you're obese, maybe your main problem is you're not getting enough sunlight, and it has nothing to do with food. How's that for a shocker? That's what Fritz Holwich taught me. So I didn't believe any of this. And most of you may not know this, but I went to medical school at LSU. And there's a very, very famous ophthalmologic researcher named Nicholas Bazan who's done incredible work. And you know what he's cut his teeth on? DHA. He's like the DHA guy in the world. And I learned this back in 95 through 99 when I was there. He taught me a lot of crap. And crap that I thought was crap because it wasn't important to neurosurgery, but 12 years ago it became extremely important. To me right now, it's huge. And the number one effect right here in this central retinal pathway between the clock and your hypothalamus, you have two loops in the eye. One loop's called the short loop, the other one's called the long loop. And what it does, it recycles DHA constantly as light comes through. But the key thing that I realized, Bazan taught me, that this central retinal pathway and the retina had more DHA in it than any other part of the brain. And I thought that was bizarre. Then I realized why. When I started to learn about physics, remember the guys who came out with GPS devices, Garmin devices? Well, it turns out that the clock here has to run faster than all the other clocks in the rest of your body. If it doesn't work. So if you have an iPhone and you use it to go to a restaurant here in Vermont, the clock that's up in the sky, up there has to run 38 microseconds faster than the one in your iPhone. Otherwise, you're going to be 100 kilometers off. That would not work. You'd wind up in New Hampshire. It wouldn't be good. It turns out in your eye, the exact same thing happens. And the reason why DHA in the eye is important, because this DC electric current runs faster than every other part of your body. That's the reason why DHA is important. And it turns out when you have too much blue light, because blue light is the antidote for vitamin A and for DHA. Do you know why? What kind of light makes vitamin A? Anybody want to guess? You heard somebody talk about it earlier. Blue light makes vitamin A. How do you know? What's the complementary color to blue? Yellow. And guess what? Vitamin A is yellow. Isn't that a shocker? That's the link between this. Light frequencies control the level of vitamin A in the eye. And also, every opsin in the body is tied to retinol, to vitamin A. There's not an opsin in the human body that's not tied to it. That's the reason why, and Chris is here so he can verify this. He wrote a very nice blog post, I don't know how long ago it was, that there's data from N. Haynes that when you have deficiencies of vitamin A, it's tied to obesity. And nobody has told you why. I'm telling you why right now. Because you're blue light toxic. Blue light makes you fat, okay? Really fat, and it starts right here. The reason why this is not equal is because light, the evolution of light does not equal the evolution of our retinal anatomy. I started to put this together pretty quick. Then I started to look at sunrise and sunset. When the sun rises, you have visible and infrared light. You don't have any UV initially. But guess what else happens at this time? You don't need your rods and you don't need melanopsin in the morning. So guess when they regenerate? They regenerate in the AM. Guess what else happens? You actually make melatonin in your eye in the morning. The hormone of darkness is first made in the human body in the eye. In the morning, when you have a combination of UVA and infrared A light. And the reason for you is what I told you before about the aromatic amino acid that absorbs that. And you see that UVA light doesn't show up here. So for the guy last night, who I don't know who you are, but asked the question, how am I going to do this as an executive to fix my life? This is the key. You need to reconstruct your AM to fix your real problem. And that was what I had to do to my surgery schedule. That's why I stopped operating at 7 a.m. Started all my cases at 8:30. It's also the reason why I moved to the 28th latitude from where I lived. Why? Because UVA light shows up. Now, you guys here that live in Vermont got some bad news for you. If you've got a mitochondrial disease, which most diseases are, you need that UVA light, and it shows up later here than it does in New Orleans. So guess what that means? You need more control of your life in the morning than any other time. That's the practical advice, okay? These are not Jack Kruse's rules. These are the sun's rules, okay? Sunset. This is when you don't need color vision. This is the camera. They regenerate at nighttime. There's another opsin that you may not know about. It's called neuropsin. It's on the cornea of the eye and it's on your skin. It's a UVA light detector. Melatonin is considered the hormone of darkness. Remember those photon traps I told you about? Well, guess what? That neuropsin tells the brain that UVA light is present and it can begin to make melatonin from sunlight. Now, what are all the effects? Here's the quantum paradox. It's a nighttime hormone because that's what the functional medicine doctors in my profession have told you. And that's true because that's when it's active, but it only activates when light is not present, but it's remade first in the eye and then generalizes all along the brain. The other key thing, and I'll just point this out to you right here. This one should open everybody's eyes. It reduces energy production in mitochondria. UVA light turns down energy production. And why is that important? There's the fourth cytochrome is cytochrome C oxidase in everybody's mitochondria in here. Anybody want to guess what kind of light turns it on? Red light. UV light turns it off. And the reason why, what does UV light make in the skin or the eye? Nitric oxide. And guess what? That's why UV light lowers your blood pressure because it causes 40 to 60% of dermal pooling and it helps your heart. But what people don't realize the effect is it turns off your ability to make ATP from food electrons. You have this direct loop that goes to the pineal gland, but the energy comes in here. This energy has to be balanced, blue and red. What does this first do? It turns your pituitary gland on. That's the reason why the question that was asked to Ruben before is extremely important. Blue light balanced by red is what turns on hormone production. If you look at a circadian mechanism, all the hormones are made usually from 6 to 10 in almost any medical textbook. They're assuming that you live around the 30th latitude. That's not true. It's different at different places, but it's a key. Anybody want a shocker? What turns off hormone production? UVA light on the skin, first time it shows up. UV light is what turns off in your blood plasma. This is the key, folks. Blue light that's man-made is absolutely destroying us, and it affects the way your mitochondria can handle electrons from food. That's where the food story comes in, because the more those respiratory proteins get stretched out, it doesn't matter what you eat. You're gonna have a problem. You have to shrink those respiratory proteins closer together so they can do what they do. The laws of nature are not subject to man's beliefs. They're not subject to man's experiments. It's a pretty powerful statement. And you may think it's, I should say, obnoxious. I don't think it is, based on what I showed you. Why? Because now there's researchers out there showing you that it really does begin in the eye and in the skin. That's how leptin and all this is linked. And the cool thing about this, my prescription doesn't cost you a goddamn thing. And what did Einstein say? In the end, the answer will always be pretty simple. So what's my takeaway? Make like the Sphinx. Ground to the ground, take as much clothes off you can. For the ladies in the audience, there's a company in the UK, I'm putting this on Sarah. They're called Kaniki. They make bathing suits that allow UV penetration so you can be naked without naked, okay? And I can tell you, coming from the South, it's my biggest problem. I think up here in Vermont, you guys are a little bit more hippie-ish and weird, so it probably would work, but you guys don't have great quantum yield here. So the reason I mention it to you is whatever you can do to help yourself. An infrared A light can work many different ways. We came up with the Quantlet, but you can use sauna. You can use the geothermal units like that you see in Iceland. That's the reason why the Finnish and the Scandinavians always use heated pools. Why? Because they're getting part of the sunlight they don't get through heating. Remember, heat is infrared light, and we don't realize it.